Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi with Retail Insider. Joining me today is Matt Davis, who is Open Table Canada's country director. Thanks for joining us, Matt, today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, we're officially into summer now by the calendar. Tell me what summer means for the restaurant industry in this country.
Summer is thankfully here, although it felt like it was a little late in coming this year in BC where I am. For restaurants, it's really peak season. It's a really important and critical period of time, especially this year, because of course we're coming through a recovery that's sustained since things broadly reopened post-pandemic, post in inverted commas, obviously. So this summer more than ever is really critical for restaurants to really ensure that they're back to full capacity and building back their revenue and reserves as we head into traditionally slower seasons like fall and then winter.
Yeah, well, let's face it, people, the weather's nice, people like to go out more, and then obviously a lot of these restaurants have their nice patios sitting out there. I just driving by, I'm based in Calgary, just driving out today, and I noticed how many patios have already been set up there. Out of curiosity, from your perspective, how important are those patios for those restaurants?
Incredibly important. I mean, also incredibly important to us as Canadians and our culture. Summer could really actually be referred to as patio season, I think, across the country. Yeah. It's for restaurants, it's essentially expanding their capacity, in many cases, almost another 50%. So it really is the ability to then expand their ability to serve more diners, really generate more revenue, really have diners experience more of what they're offering. So it's really a critical period in that sense. And thankfully, due to a lot of legislative change and regulatory changes, many restaurants now have patios where pre-pandemic they did not. And so thankfully, many of them have maintained those, I think, which just, it helps restaurants, but it's also great as a diner and a Canadian, because who doesn't want to be outside and enjoying their meal in the sunshine while we can?
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of the restaurant industry, Matt, you have the reservations like Open Table, right? And then you have obviously people walking in. What are you seeing trend-wise in that area? Like, are more people doing the online reservations now as opposed to the walk-ins?
Great question. And Mario, it really is still a changing landscape due to the pandemic and all of the things that it imposed upon really the dining community and restaurants at large. So over the course of the pandemic, we saw a real surge in pre-booking or reservations online. And that's not surprising. People had to sort of make more firm plans. They had really wanted to know that they were secure in where they were going. The safety and the security of having that reservation was key. And restaurants had much more limited capacity. And so they were really eager to ensure that that capacity was being utilized through confirmed diners, and online reservations was a great way for them to do so. So what we saw over the course of the pandemic is that the majority of our seated diners were coming through online channels like apps such as ours, Open Table, compared to 2019, which is the last full year of accurate normal data, which saw more of a 60-40 split with online reservations and traditional, what we call walk-ins, people who just don't make a reservation and show up off the street. So that trend seems to be persisting, and not surprisingly, I think people more readily adopted technology through the pandemic across industries. And so they were more familiar with using online reservations, and they started utilizing tools such as ours. However, walk-ins are a key, really important part of restaurants' business as well. And so I think one of the things that I am hoping to see over the summer is a return to more normalcy and people going out and really having spontaneity in their dining decisions, stumbling across that patio as they're wandering down the river in Calgary, for example.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the international cuisine and what we're seeing here in Canada right now with that kind of sector of that industry.
Yeah, it's actually really exciting. As we all know, as Canadians, our cultural diversity is one of our greatest assets, and it's definitely a point of difference comparative to other major markets around the world. And so, outside of the restaurant landscape and the restaurant industry, we know that last year was one of a record-breaking year for immigration into the country, and so it's interesting to see that growth or that trend dovetail with what we're seeing in the dining landscape, which is that it's experiencing, or international cuisines, diverse cuisines are experiencing an enormous surge in demand. So whether that's because of the recent immigration boom or just because Canadians maybe are getting tired of meals that they can cook at home, they're all meat and free veg. Our data shows an uptick in international cuisines, things like Lebanese, Thai, Middle Eastern, Korean. They're really seeing some of the highest reservation increases compared to the pre-pandemic period.
Interesting. And you know what's you know what I find interesting. I love food and I love all kinds of different food. But I remember just being in Montreal in the last couple of years. You know, you talk about international cuisine. You know, you're walking down those popular, trendy neighborhoods, and I'm finding and seeing restaurants from countries that I never even heard of, right? And so I imagine all the major cities are starting to see a kind of a surge in that area, right? Of all these different, beyond the typical Japanese, Chinese, Italian, that Tim, you're seeing more and more of kind of this other area that may have not traditionally been here in the past. Yeah,
absolutely. You're exactly right, and anecdotally, I can say the same thing. I'm always looking for new food experiences, and I think that generally we can see through the data that Canada and Canadians, their palates are also becoming more adventurous. So on our platform, there's 136 different cuisines in Canada that are represented.
Wow.
And so it's some of the more obscure ones that I've recently enjoyed. Afghan food, for example, is one that I'd never tried but was incredible. And so you're right, it's not just the standard ethnic or different cultures that we've seen through history, like Chinese, Japanese, which have a great presence and an amazing diversity of options. It's really regional nuances even within those countries and cuisines, and then totally net new cuisines like Egyptian and Afghan across the country.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me a little bit about the restaurants themselves and how they're becoming more and more lifestyle brands out there.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one, actually. And as someone in retail and the industry that serves retail consumers, it's really interesting to see how the dining consumer or the restaurant industry is starting to borrow from some of the trends that we've seen in retail. And so, for example, everything turned online during the pandemic by necessity, right? And that happened in the retail space as well. What that meant for restaurants is that their typical revenue streams no longer existed. And so obviously we saw a growth in things like takeout and delivery. However, then because we sort of were made to be more innovative as an industry, we started seeing things and new kind of concepts infiltrate into the space. So grocery, or restaurants turning part of their restaurant into a grocery store where diners could drop in and pick up a bottle of wine on the way home. Things like wine clubs, or like getting people on lists or databases so they could be connected with the restaurants and their specific experiences that they're offering pertaining to different wines, etc. Yeah. The best example I've seen of it is a group out of Vancouver called Aburi Restaurant Group, and they have restaurants across the country, but they've recently opened a Japanese market where it's all sorts of, like, you can go and get to-go Japanese food, sushi, but also everything from Japanese wine, plateware, it's really like a 360 shopping experience,
Sure.
not just about the restaurant. So we're seeing that sort of branding come into different aspects of what consumers might want to do and partake in when they're experiencing that restaurant's brand. So
Hmm.
everything from merchandise as well, seeing diners want to wear a restaurant's brand on their t-shirt, for example, which are now on offer in many restaurants across the country. It really sort of expresses that need or that desire for consumers or diners to show, like, this is the brand or the restaurant I like to dine at. And so in that way, it's starting to look a bit lifestyle in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Also, Matt, I understand the global guide Michelin has come to Canada. Tell me about that, what the guide is, why that's important and significant.
Yeah, this is big news. And so for those that don't know, Michelin, the tire company that we all probably remember it as or think of it as, they essentially have the Michelin guide, which has been running for many decades, which is a guide of some of their best restaurants essentially in the world. They focused over the years in Europe, obviously, which is where they were originally based, and then have expanded to the United States, Japan, other regions. And so for a restaurant to earn a Michelin star is an enormous accolade, or really acknowledgement of their skill level, expertise, and the quality of that restaurant's operation, essentially. And so Canada has not been on that or included in that list for many, many years, much to many people in the industry's chagrin. And recently they announced that they are coming to Canada and they're starting in Toronto. So
Perfect.
it's a really, really big opportunity for the restaurants in Toronto to sort of have their name exposed by this global powerhouse company and list. So I'm expecting that we're going to get a lot of attention from the worldwide community. I think the interesting thing for Canada, though, is really speaking to that diversity of cuisines and all of the different kind of things you can eat and try across the country. There's space for all things and all restaurants. So everything from the mum and pops on the corner or the Afghan restaurant, like we mentioned, all the way up to that really high-end fine dining that is typically acknowledged by someone like Michelin. So it's an exciting time for across the spectrum of the different kind of styles of restaurants in the industry.
All right, super then. Last thing I want to leave everybody with is something that you and I, Matt, talked about in the past. And it's just about reservations and making reservations and people who don't show up. Can you explain, for a little bit about that? I don't know if you have any data that indicates how many, what percentage of reservations actually never show, and why it's important for people to cancel their reservations.
Thank you, Mario, for bringing this up, because it's always an important topic to mention to everyone and educate the dining public about.
Yeah.
Reservation canceling, no shows essentially are a really big issue in restaurants, and were especially so over the course of the pandemic, given the fact that restaurants had limited capacity. So every seat, every table matters in terms of that restaurant being able to generate revenue and recoup costs to generate profit, obviously. And so the impact that diners have by not showing up when they've made a reservation can be devastating. Literally, the loss of a 6-top or a party of 4 can mean the difference between that restaurant making a profit or a loss in one service. And so what we at Open Table try and do is encourage and educate the dining public about the importance of letting a restaurant know if you can't make a reservation. The best case example for that is to do it as soon as possible. But I think a lot of people think that, oh, it's so soon, it's in 2 hours, they'll be fine, I'm not going to let them know. That's actually the worst thing you can do. The best thing you can do is you can call or let them know through our app, I can't make this, even if it's up to an hour or minutes before, because that gives the restaurant the opportunity to serve the diner that might be in front of them, i.e. if a walk-in comes in, asks for a table of 4, whereas I was holding that table for you. Now you've just let me know I can seat that guest. So it's a really critical thing for diners to be aware of. Is you're doing the restaurant a service, and you're being a good dining citizen by just letting them know if you can't show.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks so much, Matt, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mario. It's always a pleasure.
All right, super. That was Matt Davis, Open Table Canada's country director. I'm Mario Toneguzzi with Retail Insider. Thanks for joining us today.